Okay, Rabotai, now we are continuing Ilchot Shabbat. We're getting into the meat and potatoes, literally. Until now, we're learning about Kavod Shabbat, honor of Shabbat, preparing for Shabbat, a little bit about the workers. Now it's the big boys. There are 39 milachot. We're not getting to the 39 milachot de Oraita now, which Ilchot Shabbat is based on. But we're going to discuss the rabbinic prohibitions on one of the 39 milachot. And these rabbinic prohibitions happen all the time in the kitchen. And it's very important for a person to understand the category, what everything is based on. Because otherwise everything's just a big mumbo jump. And you'll never get it clear. So let's spend a few moments on understanding Hilchot Shabbat properly in the kitchen. There is a Torah prohibition, one of the Melachot Shabbat, that you're not allowed to cook on Shabbat. It's learned from the Mishkan that they baked the lechem apanim, or they cooked the dye in order to dye the curtains. Cooking or baking on Shabbat, Melachat Deoraita, forbidden categorically under any circumstances whatsoever, unless it's a life-threatening circumstance that you have to cook for a sick person. You're never allowed to cook. What does cooking mean? So, lehalacha, the bottom line, cooking, according to the Shulchan Aruch, we might learn about it a little bit more, is that anything that is not 100% cooked, that means even if it's 95% cooked, but it's not 100% cooked, is called cooking. I'm not going to get into the question now when sometimes people, they only half-bake meat, steak tartare, or even, that's totally not cooked, but even like half-baked, whether they're allowed to put that back on the platter, that's considered more cooked. I'm not going to get into that, separate question. But what about when something is not 100% cooked yet, it's 80% cooked, and you're putting it back? That's also called cooking. Up until 100%, until it's fully edible, it's still called cooking. So you're never allowed to return under any fire. Even if you would find a radiator that cooks and you put on the radiator or some type of heater, or you want to put on your roof, your roof is the sun, or you want to put on anything that is heat, that is from fire, that is cooking on Shabbat, and that's forbidden. Okay? Clear? Number two, what you have to know is that something that's already cooked, like a piece of chicken, if it's 100% cooked, you could cook it again and bishul achar bishul, because there's no such thing as cooking once it's already cooked. However, something that's liquid, the cooking of the liquid is defined by its heat. For example, like soup, if it's cold, you don't really have any benefit from it. But when it's hot, that's what you eat. That's how you eat it. So soup that goes less than yad soledet bo, which means a certain heat that if you would stuck your finger, you have to take it out. So hot. I'm simplifying things tremendously. We'll get into the details later. Then that's called cooking. So you're not allowed to cook at all on Shabbat. Not only that, if it's liquid that became cooler, that's called like it's not cooked anymore. And you can't put it back on the fire at all. With that, the Chachamim said the following, that since cooking is something that's so common in the kitchen, we are concerned that if we allow you to put something that's already cooked, or have something, not only put something, have something even before Shabbat on the fire, then your mind is going to be to make sure that your dafina is getting cooked properly. Your mind is on your dafina. Already, everybody's mind is on the dafina, right? So imagine if they're going to be on an open flame, their dafina is going to be there. He's going to be saying, oh, what else can I do? If he doesn't do some type of action before Shabbat to say, hey, I can't really play around with the dafina, we are concerned that he's going to go and he's going to make the fire higher, he's going to stoke the coals in the time of the Gemara. That is called the prohibition of shehiyah. So what we're going to learn this whole week is the prohibition d'Rabbanan of shehiyah, chazara, and hatmana. Shehiyah, leaving something on the fire. Chazara, putting something back on Shabbat on the fire. when you're not cooking, obviously, and hatmana, and insulating something, whether before Shabbat or on Shabbat, to keep it hot. So shehiyah, the parameters of shehiyah is what we're dealing with today, is halacha 9, is that you are not allowed to keep something on the fire that is on an uncovered fire, because you might come to stoke the coals. That was what the Gemara tells us in the beginning of the third parak of Masechet Shabbat, Perek Kira. The Gemara tells us, but if you do something called garuf vikatum, that means if you rake the coals, or if you pour ashes on the coals to diminish the fire, or to remove the coals away, that way the fire is not so strong. So you showed that you did a positive action of making sure that you're not going to play around with the fire anymore on Shabbat. Got it? So what happens is that if you have your dafina on the fire and you leave it on the fire, we're concerned that you might come to stoke the coals. But if you did an action before Shabbat that you minimize the fire, we're not concerned anymore. So therefore, if you have on Shabbat a dafina, you're not allowed to keep it on an open flame. You have to have something called katum. But the Ashkenazim, they call it a blech. Blech is a Yiddish word which means a piece of metal or something that covers the fire, right? They used to have, they have that still. You could put a piece of metal that covers your gas flame. It minimizes the fire. Well, you're not really destroying the fire, but it's a form of showing that you don't care. Another form would be covering the knobs, right? Or putting it on Shabbat mode. That also might be considered shehiyah, because you are doing an action before Shabbat to show that the fire is not a fire that you're going to cook on. Or putting in a plata on Shabbat. Putting on a plata is already something that's a different type of fire that you're showing. It's like you covered the flames with ashes. It's the same thing. You are showing that you're not concerned. Then you're allowed to keep a fire on Shabbat. So if you go to a place before Shabbat and there's no blech, so you can't just keep your pot of food on the fire, because you might come to cook it on. You might come to change the things. You have to have a blech. Or if you don't have a blech, for example, if you want to buy yourself a small grate, you put the grate on the gas flame, or if it's on one of those glass tops. So you'd have to find a way how to cover the glass top, or to cover the knobs, or to put it on Shabbat mode, somewhere where you neutralize it, where it wouldn't be a problem. Now, I do want to mention, the last point is that there are certain scenarios where we're not worried that you might come to play around with the coals. Like what? If it's fully cooked and then you're not worried that you're going to play around because it's fully cooked. Well, whatever, it'll cook more, but you're not so concerned. Not only that, there's a big machlok between Shulchan Aruch and the Rama, whether something is half cooked, or that's ma'achal ben drasai. So there, if it's half cooked, or some say even a third cooked, then you're also not worried about the flame, and that's the way the Rama follows. Now, usually we follow the Shulchan Aruch and not the Rama, but here all the Sephardic authorities, including the Moroccans and Rabbi Avad Yosef and everyone, say that because of Oneg Shabbat, that's literally the reason. Because of Oneg Shabbat, we allow somebody to keep something on the fire if it's half cooked or a third cooked. So it doesn't really apply shehiyah so much if you have a half cooked or a third cooked dafina. It's already on the fire. It's not a problem because it's already a half or third cooked. Not only that, if it's fully raw, it's also not a problem. Because it's fully raw, my mind is, I gave up on this already. Tomorrow morning I'll wake up, I'll see how it is. Not only that, if you throw a raw piece of meat, or the Bet Yosef sees it in a raw carrot, you show that you don't care. You made an action that you don't care. So it turns out, shehiyah is basically limited to started to cook to a third cooked. That's where the prohibition is. Anything after a third cooked, or totally raw, or you have something that's totally raw in there, you don't even have shehiyah. So it's not a hard halacha to keep. You just have to know it. What's going to be more tricky is chazara, which is going to come in the next. But it's important to know the principles over here. Chazaku Baruch.